When you're trying to figure out if a company is a good investment, you look at the profits, you look at the sales, the balance sheet, right? But what if I told you the biggest risks and maybe the most exciting opportunities are actually hiding in plain sight, just not on a spreadsheet? Well, today we're opening up the analyst's playbook. We're going to see how the pros find those hidden clues that tell the real story of a company's future. Okay, so let's just start with this question. Imagine a company is making money hand over fist. Profits are through the roof. Is it automatically a great investment? I mean, the traditional answer would be yeah, probably. But what if that company's main factory is about to get slapped with huge fines by environmental regulators? Or what if its star product is facing a massive brand-killing recall? All of a sudden, that simple picture gets a whole lot more complicated, doesn't it? And that's exactly where ESG comes in. The best way to think about it is like a special set of lenses that analysts use to see the entire company, not just the numbers. You've got E for environmental. That's stuff like pollution, climate change, and how they use resources. S is for social. This covers everything from how they treat their workers to whether their products are safe. And G is for governance, which is really all about who's in charge and how they're running the show. It's the framework for spotting all those hidden risks.
So let's start walking through this playbook. First up, we're going beyond the balance sheet to figure out where the real power, and you guessed it, the real risk is hiding. You know, the G in ESG, governance, that's not exactly new. Investors have always known that a well-run company is probably a better bet. It's just common sense. But what's really shifted, as this quote points out, is this growing realization that the E and the S, the environmental and social stuff, are just as critical for a company's long-term health and ultimately its profits.
So the very first step in any good analysis is kind of like detective work. Before you can even begin to judge how a company is run, you have to answer one fundamental question: who is really calling the shots here? And that question usually leads to one of two very different answers. On one hand, you have what's called dispersed ownership. This is where the stock is held by thousands, maybe millions of different investors, and no single person really has control. On the other hand, you have concentrated ownership, or maybe one family, or another giant corporation, or even a government fund holds a controlling stake and really holds the reins. Figuring out which one you're looking at is absolutely key to everything else. And this isn't just some abstract theory. This map shows you it's a global reality. Just look. It gives you a massive clue right away. You can see how companies in places like the US and the UK are typically in that dispersed ownership camp. But then you look at a lot of Europe, Asia, and Latin America, and suddenly, concentrated ownership, often by families or the state, is way more common.
So why does any of this matter so much? Well, because each style of ownership has its own unique type of risk. With dispersed ownership, the big danger is something called the principal-agent problem. Basically, the owners, the principals, want the stock price to go up. But the managers, the agents running the company day to day, they might be more interested in a bigger salary, a fancier office, or a new corporate jet. The whole game is making sure the people running the company are actually working for the people who own it. Now, with concentrated ownership, the risk is different. The fear there is that the controlling owner might make decisions that are great for them, but come at the expense of everyone else who owns a smaller piece of the company.
Okay, so once an analyst figures out who's holding the power, the very next step is to check the corporate rule book, so to speak, to see if that power is being used responsibly. And they do this by looking for some very specific red flags.
And here's a little peek at that checklist. They're asking questions like, is the board truly independent, or is it just full of the CEO's buddies? Speaking of which, is one person holding both the CEO and the chairperson jobs? That's called CEO duality, and it can concentrate way too much power in one person. Are directors hanging around for more than a decade, maybe getting a little too comfortable to challenge anything? And this is a big one. Are the top executives getting paid based on how well the company actually does, or do they just get a fat bonus no matter what?
Right, so you've got these principles, you've spotted some red flags, but how does any of this abstract stuff actually affect a company's value? This is the really crucial part. This is where we connect the dots from the boardroom right down to the bottom line. And to see how it works, we're going to look at 3 quick case studies to see how analysts translate these ESG factors directly into dollars and cents.
First up, let's look at an environmental case. Meet Frizzle Drinks, a beverage company. Their big, looming problem? They use an absolute ton of water to make their drinks, and in a world where water is becoming more and more scarce, that is a huge potential risk.
Now this is where the data gets really interesting. You can see on this chart that Frizzle's water intensity, that's basically how much water they use for every liter of soda they produce, it's been slowly creeping up.
An analyst looks at this trend and immediately starts thinking, okay, what happens when water gets more expensive, or what if it even gets rationed? Their costs to make the product could explode, and their reputation could take a serious beating.
So they model it out. This chart shows what could happen if Frizzle got its act together and managed to cut its water use by about 13%. Look at that. Their costs would go down, their gross margin, the profit they make on every single sale, improves, and just like that, the whole company's projected value goes up. That is a direct line from an E factor right to the company's valuation.
All right, next up, a social case. This is Well Pharma, and they've got a problem. They have a history of product safety issues. We're talking more recalls and more angry letters from regulators than their competitors. For an investor, that is a major, major red flag.
And you don't have to take my word for it. The data tells the story. This bar chart just lays it all out in black and white. You can see Well Pharma has gotten way more warning letters and has been caught up in way more quality controversies than any of its peers. They are a clear outlier, and not in a good way.
So, what's the financial fallout from all this? Well, the logical next step is to assume that Well Pharma is going to have to spend a lot more money in the future to fix all these quality problems. So an analyst will actually bake that assumption right into their financial model. And as this slide shows, that means their projected cost of goods sold goes up, which directly pushes down the company's expected profit, and in the end, its total value.
And finally, let's bring it home with governance. Our third company is Sumiyoshi Bank. When an analyst looks at their corporate structure, they would immediately spot several of those red flags from our checklist earlier, like a real lack of independence at the very top of the board.
Think of this table as the analyst's scorecard, and Sumiyoshi is not getting a very good grade. When you compare it to other similar banks, you see it has no independent chairperson, it has way less gender diversity on its board, and a lot more directors who've been there for a really, really long time. These are all classic signs of weaker governance.
So what's the financial hit? For a bank, bad governance pretty much equals higher risk. Let me put it this way. If you're not totally sure the people in charge are making smart, independent decisions, you're going to want to be paid more for the risk you're taking by lending them money or buying their stock. So an analyst reflects this by raising the bank's perceived credit risk. This makes both its stock and its bonds less attractive to investors and therefore less valuable. It's a direct financial penalty for having weak oversight.
Now, it's really important to understand that these three examples, Frizzle, Well Pharma, and Sumiyoshi, they aren't just random shots in the dark. They are all part of this systematic process you see right here, the ESG integration framework. It's a complete loop that takes an analyst from the detective work and spotting red flags all the way through to building a financial model and landing on a final adjusted value for the company. It's the complete playbook for seeing the whole picture.
And that brings us right back to where we started. ESG analysis, it isn't some fuzzy, feel-good ideal. It is a powerful, disciplined tool for finding the hidden risks that the financial statements alone will never, ever show you. So the final question to leave you with is this. If this playbook reveals the risks you can't see on a spreadsheet, what's the real risk of choosing to ignore it?